Hi, my name is Jackie, and I am the Emerging Tech Specialist for the Muskegon Area District Library. Thanks for joining us for our Introduction to Microsoft Publisher Part 1. I'm going to be using Microsoft Publisher 2019, which is going to look very similar to Office 365, a little bit similar to Publisher 2016, a bit different from 2013 though. However, you're welcome to follow along with us regardless of the version you're using. If you have any questions about anything we're doing, or you find that I do something that you can't find the controls for, feel free to drop a note in the comment section, or feel free to reach out to us on our website. That's MADL, MADL.org, and you can fill out a contact form in our Contact Us section. This is going to be a really basic beginner course for people who don't have a lot of experience with Microsoft Publisher. We're really just going to touch on a lot of the basic tools you can put to work for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to navigate down to the search in our taskbar. So we're going to go ahead and click in there and type in Publisher, and it'll pull it right up for us. So this is the Publisher app we're looking for. If you click on that, it'll open right up for us. Okay, now if this is your first time in Publisher, you might not be seeing this window over here with your recent documents. However, you should all be seeing something that looks very similar to this. This is going to be your blanks, and then it's going to be a lot of the templates that Microsoft offers for their products. So this is a really good place to look if, for example, you really quick want some address labels. It will give you these pre-formatted ones. You can drop in the words and the pictures to customize it, but then you don't have to format it exactly. So that's really handy if you just need something really quick. They do have some really good stuff in here. However, we're going to be working on all of the formatting that you can do on your own. So we're going to be opening up a blank document. Now, you'll notice that there are a couple different options in terms of what size blank document you want. The default tends to be this landscape one. However, we're going to be working on a brochure today, so we're going to move over to the landscape, the horizontal blank 11 by 8.5. So if you go ahead and click on that one, there we go. We should see our horizontal document right now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the tools that are available to us in here before we get started. Up at the top, this is called our menu ribbon. So these are going to be different tabs that contain different types of tools for us to use. Right now, you can see we're in our Home tab. Within each menu ribbon tab, there are different command groups. So within the Home menu ribbon, there's a clipboard, font, paragraph, styles, objects, arrange, and editing. Now, each of these command groups contains tools relevant to the title of that command group. So for example, if we typed up a really nice paragraph and we wanted to change how it looked, we would go to our font command group, and then we could access all of these tools that would affect our font. Now, you'll notice some of these tools are bright white text. Some of them are really grayed out. It's hard to see what they are exactly. That's because only some of them are active right now. For example, we don't have any text in our document yet, so none of the font tools are active. We don't have any text that we could edit. So that's the difference between why something might be bright white and why something might be a little bit more grayed out. The grayed out ones are just not active yet. This is actually the body of our document. So this is where we're going to be able to see all of the changes that we're applying. This is our paper that we're printing on. You'll notice that we do have a ruler along the top and along the side. And that just helps us keep in mind how big our document is, what we're doing. In Publisher, you tend to need to know exact sizes a little bit more than you might in, say, Microsoft Word. For example, if you're making a brochure, it'd be nice to divide your paper pretty evenly into thirds, and that's hard to do without a ruler. So that's your ruler. Over here on the side, you can see how many pages you have. It lists your total at the bottom, but then you can also see them right here. So if you've got 10 pages and you forget which one you want, you get a little preview of what's going on each page. Down along the bottom on this side, you've got a couple different view options. You've got single page view, which is what we're on right now, and you've got multi-page view. So a 2-page spread, kind of like a book side by side. We've only got 1 page right now, so we're just going to stick with a single page. Over here, we've got your zoom. So right now we're at fit so that we can see our entire document on our screen. I'm on a laptop. If you're using a bigger desktop, you might be able to see a little bit more, but I'm at 54%. We're just going to stick with the size that lets us see the whole thing for now. We'll come back and we'll probably be zooming in and out quite a bit a little bit later. Now we're going to talk about some of the different tools within these ribbon menus. Before we get started with anything else though, we're going to go to the most important starting tool, and that's in our File ribbon menu. Now you'll notice when I click on File, that takes us to a completely different screen. Don't worry if your screen changes like this. There's a very easy way to get out of it. This circle with the arrow in it is our back button, and clicking on that takes us back to the last menu ribbon we were in before we clicked on File. In my case, that's Home. So I'm going to go ahead and click on File again. Now, before we talk about any of the other tools that are in here, we're going to go right to the most important one, and that's the Save As. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. This is our Save As window. It prompts you with some places it thinks that you might be wanting to save things. So if you've got a common place you save it, you might see it over here. OneDrive is kind of like the cloud for Microsoft. This PC, these are all different places on this PC. You can add a place over here if you know you always like it in a certain place, or you can just click on Browse, and that's what I'm going to do here. So clicking on Browse opens up a file menu window for you. This is going to be where we can manage all of our different locations. By default, most Windows programs prompt you to use the Documents folder, and that's a perfectly fine place to use it. However, if you're ever using Microsoft Publisher on a public PC, which is a computer that you don't own, I would highly recommend switching it over to desktop, and you can do that by just clicking on desktop. The reason I would recommend that is desktop is a really easy place to find. When you close out of your programs, you're going to see your file on there, and it's going to act as a little bit of a visual reminder that you need to remove all of your personal documents before you leave. Now, the Muskegon Area District Library computers have a special feature where once you log off, all of your files get deleted. So it's doubly important to get all of your information off there because you'll lose it if you don't get it. It's always important to check though, because that's not a feature that's common anywhere else necessarily. So if you're using a computer that isn't yours and it's not at the Muskegon Area District Library, just make sure you double check and see what happens to your documents in case you forget to remove them. Do they get deleted, or are they going to stay there accessible to anybody who comes on? So I'm going to go ahead, I've got a place in my documents that I know I want to save it. You can go ahead and pick your documents folder. You can create a new folder by clicking on this button. I've got a place already set. Okay, and when you find where you would like to be saving your document, you can come down here at the bottom of your Task Manager window. You've got your file name. Click in here. I'm just going to call mine Test. This is our test document. You can call it whatever you'd like. Underneath that, you have your Save As type. By default, it's Publisher file. That's what we're going to keep it as. But if you click on it, these are all of the different things you can save it as. For now, we're sticking with the Publisher file, so we just click back on that name. That's just a document that Publisher is going to be able to open again. So we can come back to this as many times as we want in Publisher. When you're happy, go ahead and hit Save. Okay, and you'll notice it takes us back to our document. We're back in the last tab we were just in, which for me is Home. But you will notice up here at the top, we've now got our name and our type of document. I had to change my name to Practice because my test folder was already taken. But you should see the name you called it. It's a Publisher file. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually navigate right back to our File tab just to talk about it a little bit more. So we're not going to use all of these commands today, but we are going to talk a little bit about some of the differences between them. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. The information is going to give you information about your document. Close is going to close your document. Print will print it. New creates a new document. Open is going to open a pre-existing document, one you've worked on before or one someone has sent you. The really big ones here are save and save as because they're so similar sounding. What's the difference? So we went to save as first. And what that does is it gives you this prompt window where you can choose where you want to save it. And once you've chosen where, you get to name it and you get to pick the type of document it's going to be. This is kind of like visiting a doctor's office for the first time. We're filling out all of that really important paperwork. When you go to save, I'm going to go ahead and click right on it. I don't get any of those prompts because clicking on save is like telling your computer, hey, remember all of that stuff I told you earlier? Just use that. That's fine. So it's going to say, okay, well, I'll get all of that paperwork you filled out before about the file type and the location and the file name, and I'll just use that. That's what save does. It skips having you have to fill out all of that information again. So really, theoretically, you only have to use save as the first time you create a document. Every other time, you should just be able to go to save. The only time you would really want to go in and use save as again is if you decide halfway through, maybe you would like a second copy of your document, or maybe you want to go in a totally different direction, but you kind of like the idea of your first document. You can go back into File, Save As, Browse, and you'll notice Practice. There's my document right now. I could create Practice 2, and it would save another copy of my document. I'm not going to do that right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and cancel there. So going into Save As again, as a second time, we'll create a new document type. Now we've gone over kind of how our menus work here. We're going to go ahead and get started with some of the tools. The place I usually start is under Page Design. So we're going to go ahead and click on Page Design. From here, you have a lot of your basic setup tools. So you'll notice most of these are active. They're not grayed out. There are a couple that are grayed out, but most of them are white, which means they're active. What we're going to look at right now is we're going to go to our margins. So if we click on that little down arrow right here, that will open up a sub menu that gives us a couple more options. So by default, we're at moderate, which sets a 1/2 inch margin at the top, bottom, left, and right. And we can see that reflected here with that little blue border. The little blue border is marking our margins for us. We have wide, narrow, none, and what you choose here usually depends on how you're planning to use your document. If, for example, you're doing creating an image that you're going to use on a website, you really don't have to worry about margins because you'll be able to see the whole thing. If you're printing, which margins you choose is going to depend on the capabilities of your printer. I have a printer at home that can print narrow margins, and I have a printer that can't. It needs moderate to wide margins. This is too small for it. It would really throw it off. So that's just something to keep in mind. How are you going to be using what you're creating today? We are going to go right down into custom margins. Now you'll notice custom margins has at the end of it this little dot, dot, dot. Whenever you see a word followed by a dot, dot, dot in Publisher, that means that there's more choices there. So we're going to click on that, and what we should see is a pop-up box. Perfect. So from here, it will let us say, well, what do you want to do? You can make it super crazy. Maybe you want the left to be 1 inch, but the right to be 0.75 and the top and the bottom to be 1/2. You can really go in and choose exactly what you want. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 0.5. That's pretty good for me. Go ahead and cancel because I'm not going to make any changes. Orientation. From here, we could decide, well, actually, I wish I was in portrait mode, and that will just switch how our paper is set. So we're in vertical. We would like to stay in landscape though, so I'm going to come back and choose landscape, but that's an easy way to go back and forth. Size, If, for example, you are printing on a different size paper, so maybe you have legal, which is the 14 by 8.5, or you could have the super large ones, the 11 by 17. You can change what size your paper is here. Guides. So you'll notice that when we click on this little down arrow, we get these built-in ruler guides, and they're these green lines. There are a lot of these that are built in so that you don't have to worry about all of the measuring. However, you can come in and say, well, I actually would like to do my own ruler guides. You'll notice down at the bottom, there's ruler guides, ... and grid and baseline guides, ... So those are two menus that have a whole nother window that you can go in and customize things. But what we are going to do, because we're building a pamphlet, we know that we want 3 columns. So we're going to come up here and choose 3 columns with heading. Click on that. And what we see now is we've got 1, 2, 3 columns. It's not taking into account our margins because it knows that it needs that room for printing. But these 3 columns should be approximately the same size. And that's just going to give us kind of a guide for where we can drag and drop our images. Okay, now because we're doing a brochure, we know that we're going to need an inside and an outside of our brochure. You can't not have one or the other. So we know that we're going to technically need a front and a back. That's 2 pages. So over here on our pages, we're going to come back over and we're going to right click on page 1. This is going to open up a menu for us that gives us a couple more options. So we're going to insert page, insert duplicate page, we can delete pages, we can rename pages, we can do page numbers, master pages, we can view a 2-page spread. We're going to duplicate our current page. So if I click on that one, right now over here, you can't really see a difference because there's nothing on them yet. However, if we come up here and click on 1, click on 2, we should notice that both of them have these guides on them for us. Perfect. Okay, that's exactly what we want. Okay, now you'll also notice when I hover over one of these lines, I get this double-sided line with arrows pointing in opposite directions. What that means is I still have control over those guidelines. So I can move them if I want to. For example, if I say, well, you know, I like this. This is nice. But if I'm taking into account these margins, these 2 are too wide compared to this middle one. So I'd actually like to move this over a little bit. And I'm going to click and drag and just kind of scooch those over a little bit. Not too much. And it's approximate. They're just guides. I'm probably going to overlap them a little bit, to be honest. So we're not too worried about it. But those are guides that we can control versus these blue ones, which you'll notice I don't get any change in my cursor. The green ones, I can move that wherever I want. Now, we might decide, well, actually, I wish I had one more so I knew exactly where the center of my document is. Now, I know this document is 11 inches wide, so my halfway point would be 5.5. If I want a vertical guide, I can come over here and click on my ruler and drag off. I'm still holding down. I'm clicking and dragging. I'm not let go until I get, you'll notice down on the bottom left-hand corner, I've got a little measurement that tells me how far in I am. I want as close as I can get to 5.5. .5. Perfect. Now I have a ruler right smack dab in the middle. And we could do the same thing for a horizontal line. If I would like a horizontal line, and come up to my ruler, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag, And again, I can see my measurement down in the bottom left-hand corner. Halfway of 8.5 is 4.25, so that's what I'm aiming for here. Let go. Perfect. So now I can see exactly where the dead center of my brochure is. That's not something you have to do, but it is a good way to get practicing dragging and dropping your own rulers. So if you're really particular, you want your brochure measured exactly one way, you want to make sure your measurements for your brochure are exact, you can go in and create your own template by dragging and dropping here. Or we can always come up to the guides. We can do ruler guides, and we can tell it exactly where we want them located. So horizontal lines, we can drop them in. You'll see I've got one at 4.25. That's the halfway point. I can add another one. We've got all of our vertical guides. There's the one we just put in at 5.5. So you can add as many as you'd like. Now the first thing we're going to do, we're going to be creating this brochure. So it's really important when you're doing a brochure to remember which side is which. It can get a little bit confusing because it folds in on itself. So our first step is we're just going to label each side so we know which side is which. So I'm on page 1. I don't notice the difference between page 1 and page 2 now. Page 2 does not have those rulers I just dropped in. Okay, now what I'm actually going to do before I label anything is I'm going to come back up to my guides and I am going to reset to the 3 column because I have a front and a back here. And if they don't have the same measurements, when we go to fold our brochure, if it's something that we've printed, we'll get a lot of misalignment. So this is just easier. I know that they've got the same measurements. I don't have to worry about moving anything now. So now we're going to go ahead and label each of our sections so that we know what they are. And to do that, we're going to come up to Insert. Insert, as the name would imply, lets us add different things. So we can add pages, tables, illustrations, building blocks, text, links, headers and footers. Obviously, we want to add some text now. So we're going to do draw text box. Clicking on that, you'll notice that our cursor has now changed so that it's sort of a target. I'm going to draw a little box right here on the far right header. I've got my flashing I-beam in there now, and I'm just going to label it so that I know when I fold this brochure up, this is going to be the top cover. And then what I'm going to do, that's really tiny. You'll notice that we've got a couple new tabs in our menu ribbon up here. So one of them is our text box tools format, and we've also got a drawing tools format. In our text box tools format, I can see I've got a font tool. Well, I would actually like this to be a lot bigger. I'm going to click off. You'll notice I've lost those 2 tabs. I'm going to click on this box again, and they come right back up. There's my drawing tools. There's my text box. Now, all of these are grayed out again. Well, that's because I don't have any text selected. I'm going to click in here. I'm going to select all of my text, and I'm going to come to my font command group in my text box tools format tab. I'm just going to pick Arial because that's the one that I use the most. Minimum size for font is 12. That's just kind of a basic rule. So I'm just going to up it 2 times. This doesn't have to be super big because it's something that we're probably going to come back and change. This is just a placeholder for me so that I know what section of my brochure I'm working on. So that's my top cover. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to click. You'll notice there's this little dotted line that appears kind of when I hover over my text. If I'm right in the middle, there's an I-beam. But if I get really close to that dotted line, it switches to a 4-point arrow. Clicking on that selects the whole text box. And from there, I can use some keyboard commands to duplicate my box. So I'm going to hold Control on the keyboard, C, let go, and then I'm going to click off of that box. And then I'm going to hold down Control on the keyboard and hit V. And you'll notice I've got another copy. So I'm going to hover over the line until I see that 4-pointed arrow again, and I'm going to drag it over, drop it right there. And this is going to be the back. And then I'm going to click off, and then I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to hit V again. And there's that box with the top cover in it again. I'm going to click and drag it over here. This is going to be the thing here, top right. Okay, now what I did there was called copy and paste. Copy, when you select something, for example, our top cover text box, copy, it leaves the original, makes a copy of it, and then we can paste it or put it wherever we want. So what I'm actually going to do, we've got our first page labeled. I'm going to click on page 2, and I'm going to do the same thing. I know I need 1, 2, 3 sections, so I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to tap V on the keyboard 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And now you'll see I have 3 text boxes. So I'm going to click on this first one where I've got the 4-pointed arrow, and I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to come back and look for that arrow again, click and drag, and there's that one. But too high. Okay, now on the back, this is going to be technically the inside of our pamphlet. So this is going to be the inside middle, and this is going to be inside right, and this is going to be the inside left. Okay, perfect. So page 1, page 2, this is essentially the exterior. This is the interior. So this will just help us keep in mind what each section is.
Now what I'm actually going to do is resize these boxes now. So I've got my text, but right now it's inside of my headers, and it might get in the way if I want to put some text up there because this is inside my print area. I'm going to hover until I see that 4-pointed arrow, and I click on that so that I see this box. Now, those little dots around the sides will let us resize it. So I'm going to click and drag until it just barely big enough for my text. And then I'm going to move it above my print area so it's out of the way. There we go. So now I know it will not be in the way of any of the information I'm putting on my brochure because it's outside of my print area. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to hover until I see that 4-pointed arrow. Click. And then I'm going to click on a corner and drag. I have not let go of my mouse yet. Let go when I'm happy with where I want it to be. I can tell where it's going to be because of the dotted lines. Let go. Perfect. Move my mouse until I see that 4-pointed arrow. That means I can move it by click and drag. There we go. And the same thing over here. I'm looking for that 4-pointed arrow. Click and drag. I'm going to let go when I'm happy. And when I see that 4-pointed arrow, I can click and drag to move it. Perfect. Okay, that looks awesome. These, I'm going to do the same thing. Looking for that 4-pointed arrow, click, find a corner, click and drag. And there's my 4-pointed arrow again. I'm going to lift that out of my print area. Perfect. Come over here, 4-pointed arrow, click and drag, click and drag. There's that. Click and drag on a corner. I'm gonna, for a pointed arrow, click and drag up. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to decide right now uh, what you want your brochure to be about. Um, Mine's just going to be a silly, fun one, just so we can all kind of practice some crazy stuff. But if you have something specific in mind or something serious that you'd like to work on, you can make it whatever you'd like. Um, so we are going to come to our Home tab or our Insert tab. Um, Home tab has a lot of popular tools in it, so you're going to see some duplicates here. But I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to insert a text box. I'm going to put my text box right on the header on my top cover. So I'm on page 1. I'm on my top cover. I'm going to add my title for my brochure. And I'm going to do cute dogs. That's what I'm going to do a brochure about today. Uh, it's going to be super fun, I'm sure. Now, as a title, I'm going to click off so we can see it. That is so tiny. It's not going to work. I would like my text to be as big as it can be while still in this header space. So what I'm going to do, highlight my text. You'll notice that it automatically takes me to the text box tools format tab. So this is a special tab that we only get when we are inside of a text box. I'm going to come to my font. I'm going to change it to Arial again. I prefer Arial personally, but you can make it whatever you'd like. If you have a fancy font that you know you want to use, go for it. Now, if you know a font size that's going to work, you can come here and pick it automatically. I don't. I just want to go up a little bit at a time to see what works best. That's what these two tools are really good for. These are increase and decrease font sizes. If you hover over it, you'll notice I get this little pop-up that tells me what it is. That's a great tool if you're ever looking at a tool that you don't know what it does. Hover over it, don't click. You should get that little pop-up box. It will tell you the name, what it does, and if applicable, in parentheses, it will give you the option of a shortcut for your keyboard. So for example, if on my keyboard I hold down Control and the less than caret sign, I can decrease my font size. I'm just going to use the buttons here because they're right here. It's pretty easy. I'm going to increase it one step at a time, just see how big I can make it and have it still fit. 36, that's pretty good. Oh, 48 fits really nicely. But you know what? I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, that's okay, but it doesn't really catch my eye. So I'm going to make a couple more changes. I'm going to click back in here. I'm going to highlight it again. I think I'm going to make it bold. So again, either in your Home tab or in your text box tools where we see our font command group, I'm going to click on the B for bold. Okay, this is an awesome place to be. You'll notice from what I did before, all of the little dots around that box are white. When I click on bold, they change to red. Well, what's happened is I've lost some of my text. That means my text got too big to fit in the box that I gave them. So there's two solutions to this. One solution is I can make my box bigger until it fits all of my text. Well, unfortunately, now some of it's hanging off of my print margins, so that's not going to work for me. Another option is I can just select my text again. I'm going to click and drag, select that. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, so I'm going to come back here. I was doing increase font size. I'm going to do decrease now. Cute dogs. Okay, I think I can make that a little bit bigger. So right now I'm going between 48, 36. That's a pretty big jump in font size. What I'm going to do, I'm going to come here in my text box. My options are 36 or 48. I can make it whatever I want by just click and drag so that my font size is highlighted blue up here. And I'm going to type in on my keyboard what size I want it to be. So I'm going to try 40. I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard. That's a little bit better. I'm going to see if I can get it 42 maybe. 42. Oh, Oh, we're getting there. Can I get it 43? Pushing my luck. Oh, I can. Can I get it 44? I can. Can I get 45? Okay, I'm not gonna push my luck any further. That's good enough. Okay, and then when I click off, there's my title. I'm going to make you a brochure about cute dogs. Okay, we'll go ahead and end part 1 there. Be sure to join us for Intro to Microsoft Publisher part 2. Remember, Muskegon Area District Library serves its community with 10 local branches, and you can access our digital resources 24/7 by visiting our website, madl.org. That's MADL.org.